Next up on the schedule is Dan Johnson with the Transportation and Development Department. So Dan, I think you know that we're doing about half of your time for presentation and half of your time for Q&A from the Budget Committee.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so you are scheduled for, in total, an hour. So we will go from there. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Again, just for the record, Dan Johnson, Director of Clackamas County Department of Transportation and Development, and I'm joined by Mike Besner. Mike, if you could raise your hand. Cheryl Bell, Assistant Director for Development, and Deidre Landon, our Administrative Services Manager. And I have the pleasure of being before you today and presenting the budget for transportation and development for fiscal year 2021. Budget totals $168,008,515 for your consideration today. Our presentation is a little different than past years. Past years, we did a pretty deep dive into a lot of our measures and programs. We kind of slimmed it up this year with the guidance from finance and county administration. So it's more of a higher level look, but we would be glad to answer any questions you might have about any of our performance measures that can be found in pages 13 through 46, I believe, in your packet that you received. The way this presentation is going to go, real quick, we're going to run through about 11 slides of the budget presentation. We're going to actually run through the questions we received from you budget committee members to date to make sure we've answered those correctly, or at least to the extent that you require or request, and then answer any more questions you may have. The outfit today, hey, I just want to do a shout out to all the DTD employees that are out there working hard. Their group, we did a really great job of getting our folks that were in the office remote, and they're working remote on the development side. On the transportation maintenance side, we have them working safely, and I'm just really excited for the work they continue to do. We're paving roads, we're doing road maintenance, we're doing everything. So that's great. So with that, I'm driving this ship. I'm sorry about that. With that, let's get started. So first of all, just a brief discussions about resources and revenues. Just so you know, general fund, department-wide, we don't have quite that much general fund that are contributed to our total revenues. We'll talk more about that, but it is a key component to some of the financing of some of our smaller programs. Primarily, our funding falls into three categories: state revenues, which is basically our transportation, motor vehicle fund, STP grants, ODOT grants, et cetera. We also have charges for services, for example, public land corner preservation fees, local VRF, interim billings, work performed for cities, et cetera, and licensing and permitting. This is basically franchise fees, building permits, planning permits, SDC assessments, things of that nature. The fund balance is sizable, but primarily comprised of restricted or dedicated funds. Essentially, there's two primarily that are there: transportation revenues and also building services revenues, which are restricted. On the requirement side, or expenditures, those fall primarily into three specific areas. You can see personal services. We have roughly 300 FTE currently. Second, materials and services, and lastly, capital. Capital, about 54% of those expenditures are for our capital improvement program. About 36% is for transportation maintenance relocation. 8% for vehicles and equipment. We'll get into more detail on that here as the presentation goes forward. Sizable reserves and contingencies, but as with our fund balance, it is primarily within those programs with restricted or dedicated funding. Moving to this slide, I'm basically going to use that far right column, that percentage change from prior year, to kind of guide the dialogue here. On the revenue side, federal grants and reserves, we had an 84% increase in that. That primarily is secure rural schools money. Flow of grants, that changes yearly depending on the projects that we are doing. Charges for services, that's a 28.6% increase. It varies as does the federal, but continued heavy development activity levels and the new vehicle registration fee have increased that. Other revenues, this is a big one. This is up about 2,000%. The majority of this correlates to the receipt or for planned bond sale proceeds to purchase a new transportation maintenance facility, and we'll do a deeper dive into that discussion here in a moment. On the expense side, materials and services, 20% decrease. There's large annual fluctuations with this due to planned paving projects primarily. Capital outlay, 26%, obviously fluctuates based on planned projects for the given year. This interfund transfer line of 2,000% change or increase, this primarily is around transportation SDCs, helping to fund capital projects, also SDC interfund loans and repayment, planned debt service coverage for the transportation maintenance facility. We can talk more about that. Special payments, 28% increase. The majority of that is the local VRF distribution to cities and includes road transfer fund revenue to cities. We've been prioritizing and working collaboratively with our cities to transfer county roads that are within city jurisdictions so they can meet the city's desire for their particular communities. And then reserves about a 78% increase. That's primarily due to the bond sale proceeds. Moving on to this side, a couple takeaways from this slide. Like I said, we're about 300 FTE approximately. Again, our total budget, 168 million. Our general fund is approximately 4.8 million. So I know Commissioner Savas is going to ask this question. So basically, it assumes 11% cut in continued funding to the tune of $663,000. And a one-time contingency, pulling back one-time contingency of about $375,000 from our planning department. So in total, we saw about a 17% cut if you consolidate both of those, and to a total of about $1 million reduction from the prior years. So while it's only 2.8% of our total budget, it comprises vital funding for a number of our programs. For example, code enforcement, it's about 18%. Dog services, it's about 46%. Long range planning, 17%. County surveyor, 48%. Current planning, about 53%. These are specific programs within our department. Keep in mind, those include contingency and reserves that were held as a part of those programs. So if you strip those dollars out, I'll use dog services as an example. General fund was about 48 to 54% of their 68 to 54% of their funding if you pull the contingency dollars out of those particular programs. Overall, it's about a $31 million increase from last year's budget. This relates to bond revenues. We're expecting to receive the new revenues from the vehicle registration fee. We want to take a couple seconds here and kind of highlight how the good work of DTD is aligning with the desires of the Board of County Commissioners. This goes through obviously a lot of this doesn't speak to all the various BCC priorities that we are aligning or working on, but it does speak to a couple that we are either leading the effort on or that we are partnering to a great degree on. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Cheryl Bell to work through the Climate Action Plan focus.
Thanks, Dan. Well, the Climate Action Plan work is directly tied to both the board's strategic measure and a policy perspective lens. Specifically, we're leading the effort to provide a climate action plan by January of 2022 that provides strategies for the county to be carbon neutral by 2050. The climate plan itself, work on releasing the RFP to hire the consultant to perform this work experienced some delays during the COVID-19 response, but as of May 13th, the work is resumed on the RFP. Staff were also asked by the board to pursue some other climate actions while the plan is under development, and we've made significant progress on these strategies. We're advancing work related to city engagement on the upcoming Climate Action Plan, and this will be presented to city leaders at the June 4th C4 meeting. The countywide greenhouse gas emissions study is complete, and this document is important for the plan's development because the information contained within it will be used by the consultants to determine baselines and the measures that will impact our carbon footprint. And lastly, after the board approved our clean energy strategy, staff completed purchases of renewable energy certificates, or RECs, for fiscal year 1920 and years 2021, and positioned the county to be ready for the green futures and community solar options that are when they become available. And adjacent to this work on the Climate Action Plan is efforts on the diesel replacement program that Michael addressed.
Yeah, hi, good morning, everybody. So in 2019, the legislature passed House Bill 2007 that requires diesel engines in medium and heavy duty trucks to be phased out in the Tri-County area by 2029. Our maintenance department has quite a bit of those. And so basically our goal is in this fiscal year, we're finishing our list and plan for those replacements. And in 2021 as fleet, we're gonna come up with a county-wide plan because there are some other departments that have those old diesel engines. So that's what that one's about, and I'll turn it back.
Perfect. Thank you, Mike. So moving on, we've got ensure safe, healthy, and secure communities. A focus of our Board of County Commissioners has been the ability to provide affordable housing. This is basically a board goal that we're partnering on with H3S. H3S is actually taking the lead. But I do want to highlight one section. If you look at the measure, that last sentence, those units, those 1,500 affordable housing units should be stratified across area median income. So if you look at the work, our work for the most part is focused on increasing the housing options and density across the 60 to 110% of AMI stratum. That's our area, and we're achieving that primarily through changes to the county's comprehensive plan and zoning development ordinance. And that's how we look to provide additional density and development opportunities throughout the county to meet this need. The remaining of those 1,500 units are essentially work within H3S on the public subsidized side. Obviously, the 0 to 60% AMI is kind of the sweet spot for H3S and the good work they do. Moving on, building a strong infrastructure. Mike?
Okay, so by 2024, we want funding for the next phase of the Sunrise Gateway multimodal corridor improvements to be committed. And so we're actively working at the Metro Get Moving 2020 potential large transportation bond measure this November. The Metro Council is talking about potentially voting and referring it to the ballot in July as of right now. So right now in the current package, there's $180 million dedicated to a phase of the Sunrise. It's a lot of the local projects associated with the existing Highway 212 right-of-way acquisition, a lot of ped bike facilities, and some vehicular improvements as well. And so that'll hopefully get us a lot of the way there. I just want to also stress that we've been working on this now for about 15 months, pretty steadily as a staff, doing more regional coordination than we've probably done in a long time, attending many meetings, and Chair Bernard was on the task force for this measure as well. So a lot going on this one. And like I say, it's right now in the measure, it's $180 million to put towards phase 1 in this corridor. Dan?
Great, thank you, Mike. Moving on, so transportation development, some major accomplishments. I want to kind of clarify, just so you know, the color difference in the text. So basically, blue text identifies current or past board or department strategic goals, if they're applicable. So we really wanted to show you how the work that we were doing was tying into the objectives, either at the board level or at the department level. So managing for results, we went through a comprehensive update and focus of our DTD strategic plan. It went through corporate review. And you have it in the materials provided. We actually had a focus on streamlining the plan based on some quality feedback we received from some of our partnering agencies who did a review of it through corporate review, and we're really proud of it and be happy to answer any questions you might have. With that, I'm gonna turn it back over to Mike to talk about some of the transportation objectives.
Okay, well, the Board of County Commissioners passed a vehicle registration fee. And so that has begun, and we've begun collecting funds from it. We did form, as promised, a Community Road Fund Advisory Committee, which was made up of members of the community throughout the county. And they voted on and recommended a set of projects to the Board of County Commissioners, who then adopted that list. What I can tell you is, like I say, we've started collecting funds, and we've actually started working on it. We have a paving package that we have a contractor for right now that includes the first 2 local roads we're going to pave with that money, which are Caris and Ferguson. We're also starting design on Canby Markham Highway and Lone Elder intersection, the Amsiger Road, Oregon 224 intersection, turn lanes on Redland Road at Ferguson and Bradley, and the Stafford Childs intersection as well, and actually going quite a bit north and south of that intersection as well, adding shoulders. In addition, we're looking into road transfers with Canby and Gladstone, and starting to work on design on a project on 362nd just out of Sandy to add paved shoulders. So we're actively moving on that program, and it's pretty exciting. As part of that, and Dan, I don't know if you're able to pop up this spreadsheet, but we are tracking an awful lot of different programs and projects right now between that Community Road Fund and the old House Bill 2017 funding as well. And just wanted to let you know that we are actively juggling all of these programs at once and able to do a heck of a lot of work. The paving program continues to ramp up. Here, this goes through 25-26, which is a pretty good planning horizon, but in 26-27, it'll have reached the $8.5 million in paving and resurfacing that we've promised the Board of County Commissioners we would get to. And so, like I say, it ramps up every year. There's an awful lot of work we're doing all throughout the county, and we have it all mapped out to show that we're hitting almost every corner of the county with this work. Turn it back to Dan.
Just driving the boat while doing this thing is not easy. This is, okay. Thank you so much. So, oops, hello. We have transportation maintenance facility. We're going to discuss that in a second here at the end, one of our big issues. And Mike already spoke to the discussion around the coordination with Get Moving 2020. That's the Metro's funding bond. I'm going to turn over to Cheryl Bell, who's going to briefly talk about some major accomplishments within our development side. And I just want to do a time check for my team. We are 16 minutes in, so we need to get moving.
Okay, we'll speed it up. So development services had many milestones this year, but I want to really highlight two that were very important. In response to the COVID-19 crisis and the governor deeming construction essential, we took rapid action to remain open for business, and we achieved two major milestones in this. First, we completed a significant upgrade of our customer online permitting portal that was a departmental performance clackamas goal. And then secondly, in a period of only 3 weeks, we moved all our land use and permitting services to remote and online solutions. These steps directly resulted in allowing us to stay open for business during the pandemic, and it provided ways for the development community to continue to work and keep their staffs employed. And we're very proud of this hard work. In the first month of online and remote permitting, we accepted 1,401 permits and applications online, with 348 of these being brand new electronic plan reviews. And as of last week, for May, we received 1,186 permits, and 308 of these were new electronic plan reviews. Now, this has been a true crisis and opportunity moment for us. We have heard great things from our customers about our online services. And in light of this and the unknowns with COVID, we are moving forward with purchasing a digital permitting and plans review platform that will take these interim solutions and make them permanent for us. So even with this crisis and a change in our business model, for this fiscal year, the land use and permitting line of business will issue over 21,000 permits, perform 55,000 inspections. We facilitate over 300,000 customer interactions. This results in 6.7 square feet constructed, and in this adds $675 million of constructed improvements to our community. So as we leave major accomplishments and pass it back to Dan to run through significant changes.
Great, thank you, Cheryl. I want to clarify one thing. That's 6.7 million square feet of buildable area, not 6.7. It's all good.
6.7 million.
So real quick, significant changes. I'm just going to run through the fact that, a lot of these highlight are associated with some of the general fund cuts that we've seen. We're returning some drive to zero revenue. This is revenue that came out of distribution of justice court revenues to the general fund. As you see here, and I know a couple of you have asked questions about this, these are pretty specific to specific programs, kind of those programs that have more general fund. We are eliminating 2.5 positions from our dog services program. I want to make sure we highlight something, and that's the word, if you look at the description, it says eliminate vacant. We were strategic about this, knowing the general fund shortfall we were facing and the issues we were going to face in the years to come. So we intentionally kept those positions vacant until we had a better handle on the cuts that were going to be required. Secondly, a lot of these cuts that we're discussing here are associated with our planning department. Our planning department has significant general fund as well. A number of them are just the conscious decision and strategic decision to not fill vacant positions that were there. In regards to positions that we have filled over the last year, They have primarily been replacements in areas where we know we have restricted or guaranteed revenues coming in. But we have been strategic and thoughtful in the dialogue with the county administrator and HR about which positions we go forward with filling. So with that, we're going to talk about significant changes, and that COVID-19 seems to be a topic of choice. So I'm going to let Mike kind of dive into it with a discussion around the state highway fund revenues and our discussions statewide.
Okay, thanks, Dan. So obviously our transportation state highway fund is funded with gas tax and vehicle registration fees and weight mile taxes on trucks, and people are driving less, and we all know that. And so ODOT already came out with a revised forecast about a month ago, which showed that we would expect as a county to get roughly $2.5 to $3 million less in revenue through this. But it was real rough, and they, basically said this is our best shot at it right now. But we've done our own analysis, and the gas tax losses will be permanent, meaning we won't get that money back later, because if you don't drive, you don't pay. But the registration fees, a lot of those are just deferred. People are going to pay them a little late. So we should see that revenue coming in at some point when things reopen up. And ODOT will be doing a new forecast in July. So once they do, we will adjust accordingly. But we are seeing traffic already picking up. Our traffic counts are showing that. So we're hoping the original estimate from ODOT will be pretty close. And Cheryl, take it over for the rest.
Yeah, so similar to all the work we're doing for transportation, for development services, we're closely monitoring construction in response to COVID. We're doing daily tracking of permits, applications, plats, inspections, so we can keep a finger on the pulse of the activity in real time. And we're looking at historic trends related to this data so we can look back and see what happened. We're also connecting with other jurisdictions regionally. We're doing this weekly, and important partners like Home Builders Association, so we can understand market trends as we come into recovery. Key for this recovery, though, for us is really maintaining these online solutions so that no matter what happens, we can provide a way for our customers to keep building. We're also doing similar tracking for our solid waste funds, with staff participating in regional discussions, including discussions with Metro. So we're current on franchise hauling and the activity with the haulers. So pivoting from that, we go to cost recovery. I'll hand it back to Dan.
Great, thanks, Cheryl. So DTD, I think, may have been one of the only departments that went forward with fee and fine increases. We did an analysis mostly around the budget committee's desire to get a more focused dialogue around cost recovery. We have adopted new fees that are moving the needle on our programmatic cost recovery across a lot of our departments. But in light of the COVID situation, we did make a recommendation to the board that we delay implementation of those fee increases until January. We've assumed all that in the budgets that you see before you today. Last but not least, bond financing. Let's talk really quickly, because I'm assuming there's going to be some questions around this new transportation maintenance facility. So a goal of the prior administrator, and I would say the current administrator, was the replacement, moving our transportation maintenance facility out of the floodplain of Abernathy Creek. I think all of you know the long history of flooding in that area and the impact it has. Staff has negotiated a purchase and sale agreement for a new facility that also envisions the sale of the Abernathy site. Guaranteed max price is $31 million. Real quickly, funding for that is kind of a mixed pot of dollars. One is land sale proceeds. We have about $8.5 million of current revenues that are, current reserves that are set aside off land sale proceeds. Secondly is contemplating a one-time buy down from road fund of about $2 million. And then last but not least is the bond sale proceeds. Bond sale proceeds we're looking at are approximately $19 million. We are estimating our annual debt service payment on that at about $1.7 to $2 million annually over a term of 20 to 25 years. I will tell you, the bond market's been up and down, been all over the place. We have interfund loans in place that allow us the ability to not dive into that bond market now. It delays that bonding to a time where the bond market will become steadier. But know that we are also committed to the objectives of the board, which were, one, ensure that we have at least an $8.5 million average road maintenance program once House Bill 2017 is fully funded, which is in fiscal year 26-27, and we're on track for that. And then secondly, no use of vehicle registration revenues to pay any of the debt service associated with that project. So with that, I wanted to run briefly through, we're going to run briefly through the questions we had from you to date, if that's okay, Chair. And then hopefully.
Yes, that's great. Thank you. I was glad that you separated them out so we know for sure that those got responded to. So thank you for that.
You're very welcome. So I'm going to run through these. I mean, these are, I think there's like 18 questions here, like the most questions we've ever got. So that's exciting. But we'll run through those. Mike, Cheryl, and myself are going to run through these with some assistance from Deidre. So a general question, what is the largest increase in other revenues? It's fundamentally the $19 million of bond revenue that we're projecting. So with that, Cheryl?
Yeah, so we had some land use questions. First was the planner position being cut. Is that position fee funded? So the proposed budget includes removal of 2 vacant planner positions, some, as Dan discussed. One's a planner 1 and a planner 2 that we were planning on filling in 2021. When we look at the funding for these, the positions themselves aren't funded by fees. It's the program that's funded by fees. It's not position specific. So for this instance, the current planning program, which these planners were part of, is partially fee funded. Our current programmatic cost recovery for the planning program is approximately 26%. So as part of the fees and fines discussed and put forward to the board, we're proposing fee increases, which will increase programmatic cost recovery to 46 to 52%, depending on activity. And the board agreed to delay these until January 2021 in light of COVID. The next question were fee increases from last year for various permits. And it is those planning increases that that I just discussed that we put forward to get from that 26% programmatic funding to the 46 to 52%. Question 3 was marijuana revenue coming in as estimated, and what is the programmatic reason for the senior planner? As marijuana revenue, we believe it's on track, but that's a finance question because that's actually given to us by finance. It's not something we collect. There's no programmatic reason for this reduction. It was simply trying to cover the expected general fund reductions with a currently vacant position. This is a half-time position. For the next question I had was hemp and marijuana, about if we ever have false code enforcement actions based off of the hemp. And we don't experience this issue. In our code enforcement process, after we receive a complaint, we have a number of touch points with the alleged violator to confirm a violation prior to moving forward. This includes an alleged letter, direct conversation with the complainant and the alleged violator, and site visits. We also confirm with the Department of Agriculture the crop is legal hemp before we take action, because all hemp manufacturers are required to do registered with them. And so this process keeps us from getting those false positives. Pass it over to transportation.
All right, so questions 5 and 6, I think Dan already answered 5 in his talk about the building, and I think I answered 6 already, talking about our forecast of the recession with gas tax. So I'm going to move on to dog services. Talking about the cut of the dog control officer, is it supported by licensing revenue? Kind of like Cheryl mentioned, the program is supported by licensing revenue. They don't necessarily get assigned to a specific position, but yeah, it was partially supported by licensing revenue. What has been the daily average dog population? In 2019, we averaged just over 18 dogs per day in the shelter. Question 9, what is the daily average of dogs adopted? Don't include transfers to other rescues. Well, we adopted out 82 dogs. So that in 2019, that comes out to about 0.22 per day. We didn't do part of a dog, don't worry. We did, but I will add, we did transfer 118 to rescues. And also keep in mind that most dogs are actually returned to their owners. Number 10, concern about cutting 2.3 positions. And I think Dan mentioned it, they were vacant positions. And again, we proposed it to try and get to that 15% reduction requirement. Moving on to fleet. Please list all cuts to replacement of county-owned equipment. So the county's permanent rental program, which fleet operates, did reduce its planned vehicle purchases this year by 5 vehicles. Transportation maintenance is extending their vehicle replacement program by 2 years to lower the annual expenditure required to fulfill it. And dog services delayed the purchase of 1 replacement pickup. Moving on to 12, fleet inventory, who's monitoring the purchase and inventory and institute an admin review on purchases over 10K. Well, fleet works with departments to put together price quotes and specs for new vehicles and equipment when we're asked to. Each department includes their own requests and their own annual budgets, which do get reviewed by the budget committee and department leadership. And then all purchases, when they're bought, are authorized by the designated budget authority in each department. And then 13, are you increasing vehicle maintenance rates to reflect additional costs of maintenance? This is something we're looking at, and it will occur further out a little bit, and we'll have to see what the extent and length of vehicle replacement deferrals are to see how we need to make adjustments to that. We'll work with individual departments to meet their maintenance needs. And then the last question, are you permanently altering vehicle replacement schedules? Again, that's going to depend on future funding. If revenues don't improve, each department will have to reevaluate their own replacement plans and determine if alternatives such as using the county's motor pool or leasing vehicles are better options.
And that concludes our presentation.
Chair Parks, we have Commissioner Savas and then Ms. Coldwell.
Okay. Oh, good. We've got a couple others. And I just wanted to kind of check in and make sure those of you who submitted questions, did those pretty much get answered, or is there something else you still need clarification on that of the questions that were asked ahead of time? We're good? Okay. All right. We'll go on then with the list. And Brenda, you said that Commissioner Savas is up first?
Correct.
Okay, yeah. And then let's just do a time check real quick. We've got, if we do 20 minutes, we're right back on schedule, you guys. So just FYI. Thanks.
Hey, Dan, you were so quick on the numbers there that I didn't have my pen in my hand. So what was the percentage of general fund cuts that,
So
that are ongoing cuts?
Yeah, so the total, hang on.
14.6.
No, Deidre, we have 11% of ongoing cuts to the tune of $663,000.
663,000. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And how many new hires have you made in the last 12 months?
You asked that question on the last one, and I saw that, I heard that, and I hadn't had a chance to get a hold of it. I mean, I will tell you that we have done few and far between in our general fund programs. In fact, we kept all those positions open. The only areas that we have been strategically hiring individuals back is where we have restricted or available funds, which is basically transportation maintenance and building services.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to get
the number.
Yeah, I'd like to get the number.
Okay.
And, yeah, thank you.
You bet.
That's all I have.
Is that information we should be sharing through Elizabeth, and you can distribute it out to the entirety of the committee? Is that okay?
Ms. Caldwell?
Thank you. Dan, I want to compliment you and your staff. You always do a really nice job of giving us a lot of information in a way that is clear. I really appreciate that.
Mhm.
I did want to follow up on the question of the half planner position in the funded with the marijuana money. I know that that's a relatively new package, including all the H3S money. And I don't know whether or not you've had enough experience to be able to adjust that package for what makes more sense. And also if Elizabeth and your staff could chime in on the question about if that marijuana money is coming in, because it makes sense to keep it within that package. And I don't know what all the pieces are doing, but you know, it seems to me to make sense to have that half a planner position in that package. So
Can I just start with, I appreciate the kind words on the presentation. It's greatly appreciated. It is not me, it is the amazing staff that I have on that screen in front of you. Deidre Landon does amazing work with our financials. Mike and Cheryl, I couldn't ask for better assistant directors anywhere. So let's talk about the HAP and FTE. In fact, we had thoughts around those dollars last year, and our thoughts were more around the fact: is it best used? Is it best used in planning, or is it best used and moved to code enforcement? And what those dollars might look like to really achieve the desires and what we're seeing from the community. And so we were still kind of under assessment on that. But we will be honest, when it became a discussion around a flat general fund cut of 5, 10, and 15%, we felt that although departments got cut, we were able to keep code enforcement whole, and they felt they could deal with a large majority of the marijuana cases that were going to come to light with the current funding they had. And we also have had the same response from our planning department. We have not filled a lot of positions there, but they feel like they are staffed appropriately and that they can deal with any land use inquiries that may come forward regarding marijuana and how that moves. Again, if you think about a lot of the work that with these new businesses that come online, and marijuana is one, there's a huge uptick in the beginning. Right. You're just ramping up performance. And then there's a standardization to that, and that extends across the totality of future years. And we have a pretty good handle on it, but we made the conscious decision to cut those dollars. As to the revenue, I believe it's still coming in. I mean, I heard something crazy, like, I'm not sure if you heard, like alcohol sales are up 55%. I'm assuming marijuana sales are kind of up the same. And I'm not sure, Elizabeth, if you have those numbers available, or if that's something we can get to the budget committee.
I don't have recent numbers, just through March 1st. So I've actually requested those. We'll have them soon.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
And Lee?
I sent in a few questions related to the newly adopted vehicle registration fees last week, but for some reason I don't see it on the Q&A list, so I apologize if I put you on the spot.
It's okay.
The first question I have is, which revenue line item that fee recorded to, and what is the total amount you anticipate to collect in fiscal year 2021?
Deidre?
Sorry about that. I was pulling it up. So the Community Road Fund actually has its own program within our budget. So if you're looking at the tabs in our workbook, you'll see it under program 7436. So it's just after the Damascus Road funds. And we are looking, so the collections that we reflect in our budget do include all of the money that has to go to the cities, as well as our county money, because we're required to distribute that out to all of the different city partners. That's not something that the state does for us. But we have a estimate for our year-end estimate is about 5.27 million is what we anticipate we're going to get. And that really just reflects the receipts between January of 2020 through June 30th of 2020, because our program's only about a half year so far. And then for next budget year, we have programmed about 10.5 million. And keep in mind, that's for both our county distribution, the strategic investment fund, and the money that gets distributed out to all the different cities.
Thank you. I want to clarify that real quick, just so the terms align for folks that are watching. So the vehicle registration fee revenue comes in, and we have termed it the Community Road Fund. We engage the community thoughtfully and strategically and geographically around Clackamas County to figure out where they would like to spend that local money within their community. And so when you look at that that's how those two things align. Also keep in mind that 40% of that revenue is transferred out of the dollars we receive into the cities as a whole. So we may receive $11 million, but that's not the totality of revenue that we have available.
So you keep 60% and distribute 40% to the cities.
Correct. And then in addition to that, we have worked through our Clackamas County Coordinating Committee to do a 10% set aside of county money to facilitate more road transfers. So that's additional work with the cities as a whole.
Okay. And what are expenditures offset in this revenue source?
So for the Community Road Fund, what are our planned expenses this upcoming year?
Yes.
Well,
while you're pulling that up, I'm going to pull up that paving plan also as well.
Okay, which I think will help. There's a variety of them. So for next year, there's about $5.3 million that will actually be sent directly out to the cities. We have 2.4 million in capital outlay. So that's going to go directly toward projects in either right-of-way construction, design, or planning phases.
Where is that?
And then we also have some materials and services for contracted maintenance. So we actually do have $1 million that goes toward local road paving. And so we have a variety of different expenses that are coming out that all align with the different programs that we discussed with the public when we were on our kind of our road show, talking to them about the need for the funding and how we would be spending it.
So Deidre, correct me if I say something wrong. So essentially the spreadsheet you're seeing before you right now, this is by source, and we're tracking all these monies by source. And then we want to make sure so that we can be accountable to the public if and when they ask where those dollars are going to. So you'll see there's revenue coming in here, for example, paving. These are expenditures going out, and then how we forecast those in out years as they move forward. And then those, for additional detail, those then translate, that's the roll-up of all these programs and projects that we have planned throughout Clackamas County. And so you can see they fall into either the safety category, congestion relief, or paving and maintenance, which is the commitment we made to the citizens of Clackamas County when we adopted the fee. And we can make this available to the budget committee if you'd like to see it.
That would be great. Yeah, and that's all questions I have for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Good question.
Mr. Feely.
Uh-oh.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, So my first question is for Dan. Were you expecting a tough time today? Is that why you're wearing the hard hat?
No, it's for all our amazing employees that are out getting work done. Yeah.
All right. All right. So I do have a question for you. On page 3, under capital outlay, you're showing you're going to spend less than half of what you have appropriated for capital outlay. I'm just wondering what the major reasons for that are.
The way a lot of it is associated with the transportation maintenance facility and the way the way the agreement is structured. So basically, we've got to pull debt. We have to pull bond revenue this year, but we're not paying all that revenue out this year. It's structured across 2 fiscal years.
All right, that's kind of what I thought, but I wanted to make sure. And then my second question is for Mike. And it's about the Sunrise Quarter next phase. What are like the top 3-4 projects that are going to be done in that phase of the Sunrise Quarter project?
So good question. By the way, I just want to add my mute button stopped working. So if you hear a dog barking, I'm going to duck out.
My dog was just like growling.
Yeah.
So.
So let's see. So it's like I said, it's $180 million phase. And so a lot of it will include adding bigger and buffered bike lanes on Highway 212. It'll include taking some of the local streets coming down the hill from Happy Valley, 135th, 142nd, 152nd, doing some local improvements where they come together in a new interchange at 142nd. That would involve a little overpass and a roundabout. And therefore we can get rid of some signals where there's crashes. It's a big safety improvement. Let's see, that's 2.
What about the 212?
And then we would build part of a multi-use path also, extend that beyond 122nd.
What about the 212, 224 intersection?
No, the first phase, unfortunately, there's not a lot we can do there until the new road is built to divert traffic away from it. So although we'll be doing bike ped improvements there, including up Highway 224 a little bit, and then also up to where all the schools are there in Happy Valley off 177.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Commissioner Humberston.
A couple things. Dan, for somebody who lives in a county with 1,800 miles of roads and a whole bunch of rivers, I'd like to remind you that you drive cars and you pilot boats. And that being said, I appreciate the cuts that you had to make in the general fund. I see it was 14.6%, and 11 or 12% of that is ongoing and not just one time. I noticed that you have currently 34, was it 30, excuse me, 30 vacancies, and your projected year end is at 28. So it suggests to me you're going to hire a couple of people. I'm just curious as to where.
Real quick, Mike, make sure I'm good on this, but I think the majority of those are probably in our transportation maintenance department. We have various positions there that are still planned to be developed as the HB 2017 revenues continue to grow. That's the large majority of those.
Okay. And then I just wanted to commend you on the work your team did with respect to the VRF. As you well know, that was a difficult issue for the board to address, and it needed to be addressed. It hadn't been since 1986. And the amount of transparency, the public participation in picking the projects, et cetera, speaks well of your department and the work that you did and your commitment to the community. So I really appreciated that. I've had to go out and have a lot of conversations with a lot of community groups to defend that decision and explain that decision. And you making it, your team making it go the way we said it would go, it has meant a lot, quite frankly. So
I appreciate that.
Well done.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. One of the things that we want to make sure and ensure that moving forward is that we are accountable for those dollars and we are transparent on where they come and where they go. And Deidre, Mike have done some amazing work in developing these plans and ensuring that at any point in time, at any given day of the week, we can tell folks where those dollars are being invested.
The other thing that's been helpful, you sent me the chart that you showed today. It's about 10 or so projects that are directly related to the VRF that have been approved by that committee. And that really helps in showing the public, here's what was being done without the VRF, and here's what we've been able to add in with the VRF. Your money is going where it's supposed to go on the roads of Clackamas County.
Correct. And I want to do one more shout out real quick. This is for Elizabeth's group, procurement. During this COVID event, they had some delay there because they had to get geared up for EOC and get all that work done, but they have been a partner in moving our projects out to bid. We are saving money hand over fist on some of these projects. I want to say that we are, the totality of the projects we have got on the ground that have come back for bid, we're saved, I think it's almost $2 million, which is great.
Thank you.
Jan Lee?
Yes, this isn't a question, but just a minor point. What the state economist said about the marijuana fees is that they actually doubled in March and April, but over the 5-year expanse before we get back to normal, supposedly in 2025, there'll be a 5% decrease over 5 years.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Commissioner Bernard?
Yeah, so this is not in your budget, but it is something I'm very interested in. We started the discussion on short-term rentals. And obviously with the COVID virus issue, we had to set that aside. But I'm hoping that maybe we can start the registration part of it, and I'd like you to look into that part. At least get names and people registering. We're getting a lot of complaints, particularly from one person, but you know, we need to move this forward, and I'd like to see it before the end of the year adopted and the framework set up. And I know this is a challenge, and I know you asked us not to, but in order to really get this under control in the county, I think we need to at least move forward with some software, some registration, and maybe we delay the fees and the enforcement until we can afford that. And we make sure that public understands that. But anyway, that's really my only comment, other than I think you guys as a team did a great job.
Appreciate that. Can I just speak quickly to that topic of short-term rentals and the policy? Our ask to the board was to simply to postpone it until November. We're coming back in front of the board to come back and schedule a discussion with the board on how they'd like to move forward. Now, the single biggest concern we have is, if you recall, the startup for the registration program was going to be funded with some help from tourism. Tourism got decimated with the loss of the revenue on the hotel tax. So we will talk more about that, and we will have to think more about that collaboratively about how we might find revenue to start that program up.
Yeah, October might be better, just to let you know.
Okay.
Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, Dan, thanks for your great presentation. You really have a department with a lot of great performers, and you guys do brilliant work. And I appreciate working with you every week on transportation issues. And just my hats off to everyone in your department. My question earlier this morning, the administrator in his budget presentation used a word, structurally balanced. And I looked up the word during the meeting here this morning. It actually is a term, a budgetary term, that which basically means where recurring revenues equal or exceed recurring expenditures. So my question to you, Dan, is that do you feel that your department, your budget is structurally balanced?
Certain areas. The dialogue is around, we are more than balanced in areas where we have, on the transportation side, in the strategic hiring and programmatic work that we have scheduled there. Where it concerns me are those general fund subsidized programs. Right now, you know, there's a dialogue around, they pull, I'm not pointing fingers, Elizabeth, Gary here, but there was a pullback of some revenue, contingency revenue into the general fund, which is a reasoned thing to do. But that took away a lot of our ability to kind of forecast programmatically over a 5-year period about how we would ensure they are structurally balanced. And so it'll be interesting to see how that discussion matures. I would assume that if, you know, we're going to have additional general fund cuts. And so the ability to plan for that and for you to ask me to say, are some of those general fund programs structurally balanced into the future? I can say right now they are, but the future is what concerns me. And that's a partnership and a discussion with the county administrator. It's a partnership and a discussion with finance about how that works and how that goes. And it's a discussion with the board because it puts the control back more in your hands, which is what you desired, to ensure you're putting money where your priorities are at as a board as a whole. So.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Feely?
Thank you. Hey, Dan, you mentioned delayed registration fees, and I just wanted to point out you can renew online at DMV. I didn't know that. I went to check their site. It was remarkably easy. I paid my license renewal. I paid the county VRF. I ordered new license plates that arrived 3 days later. I mean, it was like the best DMV experience, but I wasn't aware of that. I just happened to go on their site. So I'm just thinking if there's a way to publicize that, you may get some of that registration in VRF money a little sooner.
Great idea. I think it's mostly the ones that are going through the DEQ component as a whole.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can go later under this.
Yep.
Yeah, so.
Yep.
Commissioner Schrader?
Yeah, I think what I picked up on, Metro is considering putting the T2020 bond measure in July. That's the first I've heard of that. Could you what's going on with that?
That's just when they're currently talking about having it on their agenda to vote to refer it for the November ballot.
That's what I thought.
Commissioner Humberston?
Just a thought on the short-term rental issue. Another approach to that might be bifurcating the whole thing, and when you set aside the licensing part of it and just look at the enforcement of behavioral issues that have cropped up as a result of the expansion of short-term rentals. Because if we had some specific codes that stated, there are certain behaviors that are sanctioned, and what the price of that sanction is, that's something specific that can be enforced against the miscreants, if you will, and not necessarily at this point in time go down the registration road. Just a thought, something to consider in your discussions before you come to us in October or November.
Thank you.
Jim Bernard has his hand up. Last one. So make this the last one, and then we can actually stay pretty much on time, you guys.
Oh, can't hear you.
On Ken's comment, the problem is that some people are not paying their TRT, and this will give us a way to track that. And it's not fair that some pay and some don't. And that's why this is an important thing to move forward. Thank you.
I want to
Good
thank.
point.
I want to thank.
Mike, were you going to say something? No, you're good. Thank you guys. Really appreciate it. Good presentation as always. One of our very complex departments. So thank you for making it a lot easier.